Hello and welcome to Hyper Live. And today we are going to be talking with Tirath Ramdas about choosing your AI coding tool.
I'm getting
my connections.
Chrome. Chrome doesn't like this. Chrome's I haven't seen those bugs for a while now. But let's see if it's a bug in Chrome or the Chromium rendering engine, because now we're trying this on Edge. So if this holds up, it's Microsoft 1, Google 0.
Oh, okay.
That doesn't happen too often, but I guess it happens sometimes. And I know a little bit about browsers. I spend a lot of my time doing browsery security development stuff. So currently, I'm a software developer and consultant. Most of my time as an IC is spent on like security product engineering, R&D. But I also do some other like platform strategy review consulting type stuff. And as a principal at chamomile.ai, I run multiple in-house client-driven product development projects with a team of a few regular contractors. I've had a few previous stints in academia, couple of startups, a bit of time in big tech. And recently, I've also been involved in undergraduate software development training at RMIT. I've done that for a little over a year now. So what do they call them? Portfolio careers. I'm living the dream.
Nice.
Know all about it.
That's right. That is the new norm. And so, what led you to? So you've obviously been involved with AI for a little bit, but tell us a little bit about your journey in terms of choosing an AI collaborator.
Well, I have been dabbling in AI for some time, and that man over there was kind of at a pivotal point in my AI career. It was way back in the day when it's such an ugly term, but big data was a thing at some point, and not many people realize this. But one of the startups I was a part of was a big data startup, and some of the folks in the investment community at the time were saying things like, big data is going to be bigger than the internet. Now, that seems like an absurd proposition. It's like Hadoop, NoSQL, like what are you talking about? That's because all of those investors didn't see big data as stopping at that point. They saw what we have now. It just took us a little longer to get there than we thought. So my journey kind of started at that point. But fast forward till today, and like I said, it took us a bit longer to get here than we thought we would. When you muse this journey, it's like not many people would have placed all their bets on the NLP folks as being the ones to get there first, like to get the closest to AGI. That wasn't really a thing. If people joined the dots between how we would get to AGI, not many people thought, the NLP track is probably the one that's going to get there first. But yeah, so it's been an interesting journey. So I'd say around the time where 3.5 took off, it's when all of those, those vibes from the past about what people thought big data would do, I think it just felt really exciting to me because I could see people doing now what people thought we would be doing like 10 years ago, but didn't quite get there. I'm not going to drop any like vendor names, but like in the big data Malaysia era, there was a lot of hype. There was a lot of genuine hype about what kind of capabilities were just around the corner, and none of those panned out. So when people say we're in a hype cycle now, I'm like, maybe a little bit, but there's also a lot of credibility to this because I know what a hype cycle looks like. That was a hype cycle. This is a lot less hypey than it was back then. So with that kind of progress being shown, it just feels like the absolutely most exciting time to get involved.
It is. I mean, there are positives and negatives in terms of surrounding AI, but I think it's incredibly fascinating kind of area to be exploring and just seeing where the capabilities unfold. And everything's obviously moving incredibly quickly.
Yeah, but, and the impacts on everybody is also something that's very important to keep an eye on.
Yes. And so tell us a little bit. So you've obviously you've selected a particular tool as a collaborator, but tell us a little bit about the work you're doing, and then maybe we can dig into why that selection choice and what have you found with it.
So I mentioned we're like I'm doing a portfolio career, and that is true to some extent. Like so, a lot of my time goes on I would put it like this. I spend a lot of my time developing IP for other people, and also some of my time developing IP for myself. There's different modalities for how that work gets done. But there was a point earlier this year where I became deeply frustrated by our lack of progress, and I desperately needed to do something about it. Now, of course, like everybody else, I've been dabbling with AI code development using ChatGPT to spit out, little functions here and there. I tried Copilot, tried Claude. Sorry, not Claude. Well, I was using Claude as well. I tried Cursor as well.
Mm-hmm.
I tried those different form factors, and they were helping me a little bit, but they were not a game changer. Then, just through random chance, I happened on a webcast by Sahil Lavinia of Gumroad, and he was talking about how they had seen a lot of good progress from Devin. Now, I had heard of Devin. Devin didn't have a particularly great reputation at the time because a lot of people felt that they had very hyped expectations. They had talked about how you won't need software developers anymore, yada yada yada. Messaging is hard. We all know that in technology. Messaging is really hard. But Sahil did something on that webinar, which to me was the tipping point, where he actually started screen sharing what his GitHub looked like. There were two things. First of all, Gumroad, I wouldn't describe it as a legacy app, but it's a real thing. It's in prod. And the second thing he showed me, which kind of sealed the deal, was he showed us, GitHub's contributor count or contributor statistics, and that was showing that Devin was already the #1 contributor to this repo. Now, GitHub's default contributor analysis is not based on lines of code; it's based on number of commits. And some people feel like, that's that doesn't show that you've done that much. You can inflate your commit count, yada yada. But the thing is, I naturally work that way anyway. I naturally have a high commit to KLOC ratio, and so I know that there are certain benefits to having that kind of approach to development. And so those kind of things, I looked at and thought, okay, that ticks 2 boxes for me. I feel like I'm going to be able to relate to this thing after all. And then I was desperate enough that I paid the $500, which was there's no trial. There's no trial on Devin. There's no 20. It's $500 just to get through the door. They've changed their pricing model now. Now they've got a pay-as-you-go kind of thing with a minimum $20. But at the time, it was $500 just to get in the door. And I paid the $500, and several months later, I've renewed over and over again.
So tell us what's different about it. I mean, we've been looking a lot at document-driven development and kind of feeding that context into various kind of models and starting to have quite a lot of success with that. It feels like Devin is kind of that, but with more guidance and support, and also that sort of those agentic flows kind of already kind of there.
Well, so I'm probably going to be the most ignorant panelist you've had on this series. Like, it's been a fantastic series, by the way. There's so many people who've done so much research, and they know a lot about what the various capabilities are. I have to confess, I don't know a lot about what options exist. Like I said, I felt like I was in trouble. I had a burning problem to solve. I tried that one thing and it worked. And I haven't had the motivation or the bandwidth to evaluate anything else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you how we use this, and you tell me how that sort of sets or level sets against everything else. So,
great.
I think there's a good lesson there, though, Tirath, that you went deep on one thing, and that's the advice I've been giving out, because there's so much potential for being overwhelmed, because every model times every different tool that leverages those models is just there's just so many options.
Right. Yeah. And on that note, actually, so I think there's some cleverness to Cognition's go-to-market here as well, because they set that $500 mark. So I've sunk that cost. I'm going to figure out how to use this thing. I'm not going to leave after a superficial play. And right off the bat, that was the first thing I noticed about the experience. It's like, okay, I've got this AI tool. Step 1, it needs an instruction on how to download the repo. Fine. Okay. Step number 2, it needs instruction on how to set up the dependencies. Step number 3, it wants to know how to run the tests. For that repo, do we have good test coverage? It's okay, I guess, but I'm going to nudge my team to maybe add a few more tests. Step number 4, linting. Oh yeah, I knew we had to get into that. So it started to give us some incentives to improve the ergonomics of the code for what the tool needed, which is already, I think, appropriate and quite it's a good thing to see. And having already done all of that, now finally, great, you're set up to start to do some tasks. And I have to admit, like out of the box, yeah, there were some quirky, weird situations. Like I remember there were 2 like ridiculous failure modes that I saw in the first week of using this thing. The first one, I asked it to add like a heading to some dashboard. It's like done instantly. Like, here's the PR. I thought, wow, that's brilliant. That's so quick. I went and checked, and it added a heading to the readme.md file. I was like, oh, that makes no sense. But, no, I didn't mean that. And the second one, See, it knows how to run tests, and it'll tell you I ran the test and it's all good. So it did a couple of things, and it checked in some stuff. And I noticed that, the tests are failing on master. How did that happen? No, I have to let it, like the tests are failing on master. And it's like, well, I didn't break it. I said, no one else has merged anything since that commit. It's like, I didn't run all the tests because I didn't think I needed to run all the tests. I just ran the subset of tests that were relevant. So it's starting to behave like the intern that does not want to return offer is giving me some sass. And so, but eventually it was doing this thing where it was learning from the feedback. And as someone who's delivered a few RAG systems, it's very clear what's going on there. It's got a little bit of a reasoning agent that attaches a bit of scope to something, and then adds that to a vector database somewhere. And then as in future sessions, you can see that context being brought in. The other thing about it that in that first initial ramp up I found quite useful is how it can use tools to also test things like in manual QA sense, open up the web page, understand visually what's going on. So those kinds of things saved me a lot of time, and that's where it started to distinguish itself from what I was used to before, which was a chat interface generating code, or even Claude generating, cursor generating code. There's another thing which I liked about it, which I know that many people might not feel this way, but I actually like that it got out of my IDE. And and that's because it's not that I don't spend time in an IDE. It's that when I spend time, it's my IDE. I don't want anything messing with it. I don't want you to move my tabs around or open stuff. Like, I want to have full control over that. That experience. But the other thing is, if I'm sitting there babysitting something working in my IDE, I'm not sure it's really unlocking that much of my time. I really valued that ability to fire off a task and just not even be at the computer to be able to do something else.
So some of the audience may not have used Devin or any of the similar tools like All Hands or Open Hands or things like that. So how are you interfacing with it most of the time if you're not interfacing it through your IDE?
So they do have a console, but let me tell you about the true unlock here. So like there's phase 1 of this, where it's enhanced my productivity as an individual, as an IC. But with my principal hat on, I've got a rule now where all Devin sessions have to start on Slack. There are huge benefits to this. The first one is that it just creates such transparency. When I'm reflecting on my career as a software developer, one of the biggest problems that software developers sometimes have, and it doesn't matter if they're good or not so good. In fact, sometimes this problem affects the good ones even worse. It's that like little bit of intellectual vanity, that desire to protect what they're working on until it's ready to be shared. See, I think that there's numerous problems with that. We don't have to get into the lack of growth mindset, the lack of transparency, the risk of everything staying on one developer's computer rather than being shared with the team. But forcing everything onto Slack just breaks that control right away. If you start working on something, I expect it for literally the entire team to be able to see it. And
that's great.
I lead by example that way. I initiate everything on Slack. And I know that the team sees it. In our one-on-ones, they say, wow, so you're working on that. And I didn't know that Devin could take a screenshot from its VM and paste it in the chat session. So that accelerates, I don't have to test things on I can provide that feedback immediately without even trying to run software myself. And so that's been great from a transparency standpoint. That's been great from a learning standpoint. That's also been great from a collaboration standpoint, because one of the other things you get to do is you get to just jump into a Slack thread and start to guide things a little bit. If you see someone working on something and you have a perspective on how it would integrate better with something else, or just avoid a certain type of bug, whatever it may be, you don't provide that feedback to the developer. You kind of just jump into the thread and provide that feedback directly to Devin. So it's almost like you're not even correcting the developer, you're correcting the tool on the fly. So a lot of the focus on the use of AI in development is on AI as a system of intelligence and the intelligence aspect of it, and rightly so. But the part that I'm most excited about is actually the AI, but more so the UI, and how it might shift us towards new ways of working, ways which are more transparent, more collaborative. And I think that's something that I'm starting to see what that future looks like. Less time in the IDE, more time elsewhere.
Yeah, I think we've definitely seen the same thing. And I think some of the techniques that we've picked up over many years in the industry I can see how they're going to become very effective using AI tools. Like, we've done a lot of work with things like specification by example. And when you combine that with, you're really trying to provide the context for whatever AI tool you're using to be able to do useful things for you. And so there's general guidance in terms of context, but then there's specific guidance around the bit of work that you're trying to achieve. And so there are lots of things that we know how to do, which can be applied in a different way and get really amazing kind of results from. But like you say, it's lifting you out. It's a very different role as an engineer or a developer, right? It's like you're just jumping up to this next level of abstraction.
That's
and then you have to have different ways of guiding this kind of tool to do what you want it to do.
Mm-hmm. Is that where you feel some of the productivity gains are, that you can operate at different levels of abstraction rather than productivity just through code being generated and typing toil being taken away from you?
So initially, when I was working on this stuff, just as an IC, like without roping in the rest of the team, I was trying to be a bit meta. I was trying to be a bit meta about it, trying to be aware of how I was using the tool, and I realized that I was probably using it in three different ways. The first way was where I was being very directive, where I knew exactly what I wanted and I was specifying something very clearly. And we can get into some of the patterns a bit later on about how I use Devin to do that effectively. But I really have a strong opinion. I have a very clear vision about what I want. I specify it in as much detail as possible. Off you go, flesh it out. There are other ways of using it. One is the second one probably is where my knowledge is lacking in a certain area. And that might be to do with an existing code base, or it might just be with a technology that's new to me. And so the work is a lot more about uplifting my understanding, but preferably uplifting my understanding in the context of this project or this code base. So you think about like pre-ChatGPT, you run off and find a tutorial or a LinkedIn video or something. Then ChatGPT, you can start to ask questions. But now you get to it's true learning in the flow of work, where you can ask something with exact context that you need to get the job done. And the third one is a mode I call offload, where I really have no opinion about how you do this. Just get it done. This is a CRUD thing. I don't need to babysit you. I trust you've seen enough CRUD apps. Just get it done.
Yeah. And I think the documentation
YOLO one shot.
Yeah, it works more often than you'd like to believe. Actually, those I've realized that those are the ones that are the most terrifying for junior developers. We'll get into that a bit later, maybe.
Yeah, I love the documentation side. I think, and there's so many times you'll see maybe not great documentation or missing documentation around certain aspects of a code base, and just to be able to guide that or to create that or to fix that as you're kind of interacting with the code base, incredibly powerful, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. So this is the opinion that might get me cancelled.
As long as it doesn't get this show cancelled, that's okay.
So all opinions expressed by me are exclusively my own, not Hyper's. So numerous times in my career, I've seen this pattern where somebody designs something and it's perfect. The tech is just brilliant, right? And this genius is commemorated with a lengthy code comment in a header file.
Yeah.
And what was it that Mike Tyson said? Everybody's got a plan until their code ships to prod. And then that first bug report comes in and you're like, so that design, like that doesn't work. There's things we need to change right away. Someone gets in, makes like a bunch of changes, and hopefully the person who's making the changes is the person who wrote that epic comment. Otherwise, that comment stays with the code has changed.
Yeah.
I want you to think about what that does to an LLM.
Yeah, interesting, right? I must admit, I've always been of the camp of the sort of Uncle Bob camp of, use comments sparingly, and certainly not the comment that's the same as the function name. It's like name things well, and then you remove all of that sort of complexity and noise.
But it's those design descriptions that don't match the design anymore. I think those are problematic in and of themselves. They are, I suspect, and I've seen a little bit of this already in the work that I've done, although there hasn't been so much legacy work going into these systems yet, I have to admit. I suspect those are going to be catastrophic for LLMs. And the reason I suspect they're going to be catastrophic for LLMs is because of this class of this failure mode that LLMs have shown to be, they really struggle with, which is sycophancy. They will listen to a prompt. They will take whatever you say in the prompt as gospel. They're very reluctant to push back on it. And generally speaking, they're not very critical of what you say.
Yeah.
So if you put in a block of code where this will be a good test, I think, of LLMs, like from an adversarial standpoint, put in some code and then put in a comment that describes not quite what's there and see what its understanding is. So when I think about the role of documentation, specifically when we're talking about discrete systems, right, discrete body of code, do you want it documented? From a LLM ergonomic standpoint, is it going to be better to have the documentation inferred by the LLM based on the code or based on its ability to run the code and observe the output if it's not sure?
This is the old living documentation, right? So we, historically, a lot of people got quite good at having test suites that were the documentation, which also connected to the code base. So you knew that it had to be in sync, right? But I think this is almost the next evolution, right? Why I can now have some layered tests, micro integration tests, and then I can just create the documentation based off that. I don't have to link them anymore, right? Because it can be just dynamic and on demand, which I think is quite an interesting concept.
As a developer, I appreciate seeing comments, but not when they're out of date, not when they're wrong. That's very detrimental, and I suspect that's going to be worse for LLMs. The other one, which this really happened in a project, was Python type hints. They're non-binding, which means what is the point? Ostensibly, they've got some kind of point, except when they lead your LLM code generation astray. I had a situation where it was insisting on doing a local level import to get around some kind of perceived circular dependency. And that surprised me. I thought there's no way this is true. And then I demonstrated it. I like actually stepped into the PR that Devin made, changed its code and pushed it in and said, see, this works. And then it explained, I can see now why it works. But what was happening before was some static checks were throwing it off. Some static checks which were not valid, were not correct. But those kinds of things, like those kinds of adornments that we put into the code, whether they're comments, type hints, and stuff like that, I think there are situations where they're not objective wins anymore. And we need to start making careful, calculated, conscious decisions about whose ergonomics do we care about more, the LLM's ergonomics or the human ergonomics, because I think they're not always aligned.
No, that's a very good point. Yeah, and you kind of need both, right? Depending on, well, I guess it's contextual as well. It depends on what kind of work you're doing. What does the code base look like? I mean, oftentimes humans you've got to take responsibility for the code, and therefore you've got to be able to read it, understand it. But at the same time, when it's when you've got patterns that are repeating, then that need sort of diminishes a little bit, and it depends code base to code base as well. But yeah, it's you start to think about things differently, right? It really is quite a mindset change for the way you interact with code, isn't it?
I think so.
Maybe
yeah.
we're having a lot of the big debates settled. So it's like typed versus dynamic. Now it seems like strictly typed languages for the win. Are unit tests valuable? Is linting valuable? Seems like now that the LLMs make great use of those for context, maybe that's maybe the tide has turned on those great arguments.
Yeah, but also I think the cost of implementing those things is now a fraction of what it was, right? So you can, a lot of toil goes out of the way you develop, and you can just rely on, for those very simple things that once they're set up, they can just continually run. Then the overhead kind of disappears, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So, go ahead, Gareth.
I was just going to ask, so how have you found, so in terms of quality practices, like has Devin, do you feel like this is a more general question, is AI helping you to write higher quality, the same quality, or lower quality? Like what are the things you look out for, and what are the things you've noticed have become easier or better?
So just as I'm trying to think of like the meta metrics that I can look at, because assessing code quality is extremely hard. But when first of all, obviously we're committing faster than ever, we're merging faster than ever, we're shipping faster than ever. That's just table stakes. But when and it is a collaborative effort in terms of what you ask for and what you get. And lately, I've settled on a pattern on a couple of projects where if I specify a task, which I've broken down in my head rather subjectively, but when I pursue that through the tool, and the end result is a pull request somewhere between 300 to 500 lines, including sometimes like a Django migration, that makes me feel pretty good, because that's a deliverable unit of value, which I was able to do in a reasonably manageable amount of code to be able to quickly review with human eyes. When I start to see things explode, that isn't necessarily a problem if the intent is perhaps not for that code to last terribly long. In terms of how it's affected our code quality, I think the true test for code quality is like, do you know what's in there? And that can be a challenge, of course. And the tooling does sometimes help you understand what's in there, what changes have been made. One of the new features that Devin just rolled out is they've got like a little visualization accompanying every pull request to kind of show you, in terms of lines of code, what were the various subsystems that were changed and how they interrelate. And I think that's meant as a hint to you to get the right person to review the right areas, to do things like that. But it's also changed the way we structure our code a little bit. So we used to have a bias towards monorepos. And one of the things that we don't have to get into a discussion about monorepos here, but one of the problems that we encountered when we tried to unleash Devin on this on a monorepo that we had was it struggled with the scoping. It would sometimes go and modify code in the wrong place. So in terms of like how it's affected the way we work, I was talking about ergonomics. One of the things that we're trying to do consciously now is to avoid monorepos to the extent possible. So we've actually gone towards, again, smaller, discrete repositories. One of the wins of that approach is also that we get to keep some more privileged subsystems completely out of scope.
Yes.
It's not even in the code base at all. But also, it reduces the size of the indexes. It reduces instances where retrieval has gone to the wrong part of the code. And so that's one of the things that we settled on now. Whether that people tend to like monorepos because it gives them a sense of uniformity, I think, and like the consistency. Whether we're able to maintain that despite this pulling away from monorepos, I think, watch the space. I think our system is distributed anyway. We have to deal with different versions anyway. for some of the things that we build. So that isn't necessarily going to be a problem. But there are people with very strong opinions about monorepos. And I do wonder if those people might have, without additional tooling support, have a little bit of a disadvantage going into some of these practices.
It's interesting. There's real swings back and forth, and even within the AI assisted software development communities, depending on which models and which tools they're using, they're swinging either towards or away from monorepos. So yeah, because it's sort of like, when there's a big jump in the context window, then maybe they can get away with like pulling in a lot of their code context, dragging it in. But then they get to the point where it's like, oh, our code base is too big. There's too much stuff, and we're redlining the context window. So it keeps seesawing back and forth. Same with document driven. It's like load in a lot of documents, but if the model is able to look at more of your code base and do more reasoning about it, then maybe you need less documentation. It's just it keeps swinging back and forth as these things evolve.
Yeah, I think the constraints are fundamentally changing, aren't they? Like I think this is going to be one of the bigger, the harder things for people to get their heads around. Some strongly held beliefs that were the right, that was the right way of working given a set of constraints. Those constraints have now changed, right? And the impact on especially for senior folks that have done a lot of experience and they've got great patterns that they know work in their context, this is going to be hard. Yeah,
and the thing is, I think the thing that a lot of experienced developers in particular need to realize is I think we're now at the earliest innings of seeing how this plays out. Because, a lot of the, like the very concept of an abstraction model, what do they say? The map is not the terrain. Well, in software and technology systems, abstraction layers are that equivalent. And abstraction layers, they serve different fundamental purposes. If they're there for security and reasons like that, of course they belong. But sometimes abstraction layers are built as for human ergonomics, to be able to do more with less, to expose less of a control plane for people to be able to manage different things. But you do find impedance mismatches sometimes. So there are harmful abstraction layers, and I think what do we need an abstraction layer for in some kinds of projects if we don't need it for human ergonomics? So I am very intrigued by the idea of what if we redesign software where abstraction layers are minimized. And this isn't just pulling a theory out of the air. There's been a lot of research done into alternative operating system architectures. For example, exokernels were like a logical extension of microkernel architecture, where you're going all the way to doing the absolute minimum to the point where you barely got any abstraction layers. And so some of those ideas might now be more practical because you get this unlimited AI sort of reasoning on top of any kind of code that you need to generate. So I think at this point, it's still early days. We're still wondering about monorepo versus non-monorepo, but this is the earliest innings of that. I think if we continue seeing this evolve, we are going to start to challenge more and more fundamental concepts of how we get software made.
Yeah, and there's a trust factor there as well. So you talked earlier about
that's huge.
The quality, and familiarity with what's in the actual pull request or what's in the actual commit. And I find as people get more used to the capabilities of the tools, they know when to trust and when not to trust, when they need to closely verify and when they can look at something which is more of a summary or just trust that their tests, their playwright tests, showed that the design matched what was created.
No, it's funny. A lot of people use AI to generate the tests. That's the one thing we don't do because it feels like the one place where we can still maintain a little bit of control and compliance. We're like, no, we're not letting AI write the playwright tests. We have people still doing that.
That's your deterministic validation, isn't it? Like that's you don't want to. That's your guardrails, basically, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, but to your point about like how predictable these systems are, like what? Like people never ship software bugs. Like it's already kind of numbers game, and things like formal verification. Yeah, it's been around forever. It hardly gets applied. So I think it's a comfort thing. It's a mitigation thing. It's a safeguards thing. It's an experience thing. I don't know exactly how this plays out, but I think the worries about the quality of the code from a ability of people to jump in and take over standpoint, that's absolutely a valid concern. But from a like, is this code going to break something? I don't know if there's I don't know if there's any data yet to really say that code written by an LLM is going to be inherently buggy compared to what a human would have done. Now, the pace of releasing that will, you ship more code, you ship more bugs. So that's going to be a thing. But in terms of like, if you look at the discrete units of work, I think we need more data. I don't think we know yet.
Yeah.
As the principal, so sometimes you're operating as the individual contributor, the IC, and sometimes you're acting with your principal cap on. Are you finding that you're needing to review more activity because of that increased frequency?
Yes. There's definitely a need for more review. However, I don't just review the code anymore. I review the prompts. I get to be more proactive. I get to jump into the thread. I get to do it on the fly. I get to review in the flow. See, this is what I mean. Like, how does software happen today without AI? Give a developer a task. He kind of does stuff. You don't really know. He puts up the PR, and then he waits for reviews. Oftentimes they've worked too long on it to the point where there's like you're kind of looking for things to nitpick, and you kind of wish they put it up earlier, or it's completely off track, and you kind of wish they put it up way earlier, so you get one of those problems. But now it's a lot more incremental. It's a lot more transparent. It gets up early. So the final result is rarely a situation where I have to like, can we schedule a one-on-one to talk about this? It's already getting to a better state. That's the first thing. The second thing is because it's benefiting from all of the context that I put in. So as a principal, I still am IC on a lot of these. I'm still an IC on all of the projects as well. So I get the opportunity to craft the knowledge base.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah. So how are you're sharing context? Are you're sharing prompts with the team as well? Like, what does that look like in terms of?
So that's where I'm relying entirely on Devin's mechanisms for this. In the flow of doing my work, knowledge-based recommendations come up. There's an opportunity to scope them. The scoping used to be as simple as like you can scope it to a repository or scope it for like everything. But lately, they've improved the sophistication of their scoping mechanism. And I recently saw one of the suggestions that suggests scopes was for any Django project, do this. And I was like, yes, perfect. That's exactly what I need. So that kind of smart, dynamic, semantic scoping is I think, very, very helpful, very, very appropriate. I totally believe it works because I know how RAG works. So that's another way why we're not pushing off the review. It's not lazy review anymore. It's eager review. It's nudging things into the direction as you go before the work even started, because it's already a bunch of knowledge base, already a bunch of preferences that are baked into the knowledge subsystem that's generating the code.
Yeah. Can I please put this out? Sorry, Gareth. I was going to say, can I please put this out there into the world that there needs to be some standards for how these different tools define these scopes? That would be an absolutely terrific opportunity. As users of these tools, we are going to swap tools. And at the moment, there's some pretty manual work to be like, okay, well, is this going to be in the Claude MD file, or am I going to use these? It's a real headache. So, but yeah, the ability to scope it and provide rules at different scopes is very powerful.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, organizational, team, service, they all have different kind of dimensions to them. I think certainly shifted to having more general documentation. One of our colleagues describes as a min-doc set, minimum documentation set, as a particular folder structure with some sensibly named kind of MD files. and then whichever tool you're using, you can just point at those. And I guess that's the bit of, the lowest common denominator here is the natural language processing and querying, obviously. But you'd think that perhaps there might be some kind of structure that evolves over time that just helps, like we're seeing with, MCP kind of protocol, that thing for context, perhaps.
Yeah, sometimes what I find interesting is the kind of suggestions it comes up with, like, oh, I didn't think I would have to point that out, and it generated a suggestion that it would find helpful. So I also think that's a part of it. I don't always know what needs to be in the knowledge base, because these aren't, they're not always, again, like this goes back to the question of ergonomics. I don't feel like I'm writing it for people necessarily, and I'm not authoring it. I'm waiting for it to suggest and tweak. So whatever comes up in the flow of a session that it felt caused it to course correct is something that it will try to remember for next time. And those hints, this is useful for me hints are also very valuable to me.
So what would you give as, sorry, Daniel, so what would you give as guidance to someone? I guess we're sort of getting towards the sort of wrap up of the session, but if someone's starting out and they're looking at different tools, and what guidance could you give them to help them on that process?
I'm not sure I'm qualified to offer anybody guidance, since I didn't do that. I think I think having an awareness of how you work, and then trying to map that to the appropriate tool, because I still use chat interfaces a lot in my practice. Like I said, IDE didn't work for me. I don't do that. But I think as you incrementally work on tasks, and you try and as you develop more and more awareness of what works where, it'll build up your nuance and your sort of muscle memory for how to use these systems. And I think that translates across. One of the big unlocks with using Devin for us really was just getting people onto Slack and doing things that way.
That's great.
And the fact that it was agentic, and that mapped well to the kinds of systems that we were building. The fact that I can just fire it in there and it runs it in VM and it works. So that worked well for us. It won't work necessarily for everybody. A lot of the work that I do is just Windows software, for example. And Devin, Cognition rather, didn't have Windows support on their roadmap last time I asked, and fair enough. So if we wanted that kind of capability, I'd do something else. So it really is very contextual. But I don't know. What advice would you give? You've got the 30,000 foot view. You've talked to everybody. Yeah. What does the lay of the land look like to you?
I think I really like your advice on just start with whatever feels most natural to you, because I think then you're going to enjoy the learning process, and it's easy to swap tools later on once you kind of get a little bit of an idea about how they work and what works effectively for you. I guess I think the context is super important. Like being able to, don't start from it with a blank sheet of paper. Try and provide enough context so that the answers you're going to get back are something that you want to see. Your coding style, the things that are important to you, and you can play with that. But I think people get a little bit frustrated sometimes because they don't provide enough context, and then they get something that's so divergent from where they want to land that they're kind of scrambling to kind of get back to something sensible again. So just deleting that, adding some more context, starting again, that's kind of a good starting point.
So one of the patterns that I've unlocked, so I mentioned that some tasks I like to be very directive, and that used to be me typing in the prompt, I've changed it now. What I do now is I create the branch first, and I kind of set up what it needs to look like. There's various functions, or like sometimes even just code comments like start here. And so I've already given it a blueprint, and I call this that meme draw an owl, where it's like someone draws two circles and I say now draw the rest of the owl. And that's meant to be like, oh, this is, like there's no specification there, but that works for an if you're asking you draw the two circles and say, that's the structure of what the owl needs to look like. The head needs to be there. The tail needs to be there. Fill in the feathers. That's been working remarkably well.
Yeah, great advice.
Definitely.
Well, I think that's... sorry, Daniel.
I just think that the fact that you were very focused with a tool and learned that tool in depth, for everyone that's feeling overwhelmed for, because there is so many tools and so many models. So yeah, that's a big takeaway from me. So
you keep mentioning models. I have no idea what model Devin uses. I really don't.
Yeah, I mean that is a feature of Devin and All Hands, where you could dig into if you wanted to, but most of the time they've maybe taken some choices away from you, but in a good way.
I mean, that paper by that leaked memo by Google saying that there's no moat in the models, that the models are just a commodity thing. Do you think there's truth to that, or do you think there is value in trying to understand? Do I want Quen? Do I want Claude? Like, what's the best? Like, is there merit in carrying out that work?
It's a fascinating question, and it's I don't think I know in terms of most of the conversation I have with people. It seems to be personal preference. It's like just if you look at the statistics in terms of the model evaluation, one will pop up slightly above the other, and then the next one will kind of there's not. If you look at those tests, it doesn't seem to be a lot in it. But then I know from my perspective, like I love Claude Code. That's it seems to be the context, the way I write context, whatever it is, it responds the best for me. It looks visibly better to me, even though the model may not be better for other people. So I don't know.
I think you hit the nail on it. What differentiates the success of a project like this is your use of the context, not so much the model. That's the real unlock. You master the context, you're good to go.
Yeah, that's probably a pretty good place to wrap up.
Thanks very much, Tirath. I might post. I took so many notes that I might actually just post them as part of the show notes.
Sure, I look forward to reading them.
Well, thank you so much, Tirath. Lovely to spend a bit of time with you talking about these things, and look forward to catching up again soon.
Thanks for having me.
So you can find Tirath on his LinkedIn. And we've got that there. So if you want to chat with Tirath about a project or just AI in general, or about practices, things like that, you can find him there. And if you want to talk to the team at Hyper, you can catch us there.
Yeah, or join it, just message us on LinkedIn. But yeah, thanks everybody, and thank you, Tirath, and until next time.
Thanks.
Until next time. See you.